Hello and welcome to Firstpost Live, where we bring you the day's top 4 stories from across the world. I'm Joshua Barnes, live from the Firstpost studios. Let's begin with the headlines. Taiwan says Chinese military aircraft are simulating attacks on foreign warships in the Taiwan Strait as Beijing shadows every vessel passing through the contested waterway. French President Emmanuel Macron arrives in Beijing to press China on securing a Ukraine ceasefire and to discuss strained trade ties with Xi Jinping. The European Union seals a deal to ban all Russian gas imports by autumn 2027, taking its biggest step yet to cut off funding for Moscow's war in Ukraine. Israel says it will open the Rafah crossing in the coming days, allowing Gaza residents to exit into Egypt under the terms of the current ceasefire. And South Korea passes a new law banning unmanned balloons in no-fly zones, aiming to stop activists from sending anti-North Korea leaflets across the border. The Indian rupee woke up to a historic low today, slipping past the 90 mark against the US dollar for the first time ever. It's a symbolic level, one that signals more than just a number on a currency chart. Over the last few days, the fall has been steady. On Tuesday, the rupee closed at 89.95 versus the dollar, after losing 42 paise in a single session. And if you zoom out, the picture becomes clearer. The rupee has already fallen around 5% this year. In fact, it's now one of the worst performing currencies in Asia. But here's the twist. This decline isn't happening because India's economy is weak. Quite the opposite. India's GDP growth has been stronger than expected. The real pressure is coming from outside. Higher US tariffs on Indian goods, delays in a key trade deal with Washington, and foreign investors pulling money out of Indian markets. Foreign investors have withdrawn nearly $17 billion from Indian stocks this year. Foreign direct investment has also been muted. When money moves out, demand for dollars rises, bringing the rupee under more strain. Add to this a widening trade deficit, which has crossed $40 billion in October, and a need for the dollar only grows. And that demand matters because India depends on imports for essentials like fuel, electronics, cooking oil and fertilizers. When the rupee weakens, these imports become costlier. A weaker rupee, simply put, is like having a smaller shopping budget when prices abroad stay the same. Domestic markets have felt this pinch too. The Nifty slipped below the 26,000 mark. The Sensex lost nearly 200 points as a falling currency raised concerns about inflation and foreign money exiting. But for most people, the real impact will be felt at home. Petrol and diesel may inch up in price. Gadgets could become more expensive. Students paying international fees will immediately feel the jump. Vacations abroad will cost more. Even home loans could eventually face pressure if inflation rises and interest rates shift. So, why is the Reserve Bank of India, the country's central bank, not stepping in aggressively, as it has in earlier currency crises? Because something has changed. The International Monetary Fund recently reclassified India's currency system from stabilised to cruel-like. That means the RBI is guiding the rupee's movement, not fighting every fall. Rather than drawing a hard line at 90 or any other level, the RBI now prefers gradual, controlled depreciation that reflects the country's trade realities and inflation gaps with the world. In simpler terms, the central bank is choosing patience over panic, and that's what makes this moment different. The dollar isn't unusually strong. India isn't short of reserves. The RBI isn't scrambling. Instead, the rupee's slide seems to be part of a long-term adjustment, a slow reshaping of India's place in a shifting global economy.
The dollar weakness next year should support mild rupee appreciation, and that could pick up pace around seasonally favorable first quarter for rupee.
For now, the currency is signalling that the world around is changing, and India needs to adjust with it. The next few weeks will reveal if the rupee's fall is just a passing phase or the start of a new normal. Moving on, India's seafood industry has pulled off a quiet comeback this year, and it comes at a time when the sector was expected to struggle. Official data shows that between April and October, India's seafood exports rose 11.6%, touching $4.69 billion, up from $4.2 billion a year earlier during the same period. These numbers arrive barely months after the United States imposed steep tariffs on Indian seafood, beginning August 2025. Officials say the rise wasn't accidental. The Commerce and Industry Ministry's analysis shows that higher shipments to the European Union, China, Vietnam, Russia, and the UK helped plug the hole created by the tariff-hit US market. Exports to the EU alone surged 40% in value. Shrimp exports shot up 57%. That surge is the result of one big shift. Earlier this year, the European Union approved 102 Indian fishery units for exports. That new listing opened the gates for more aquaculture, shrimp, squid, cuttlefish, and octopus to enter the bloc. The expanded access didn't happen overnight. A series of meetings in Brussels and New Delhi helped convince EU regulators that India's food safety and traceability systems remain strong. But the EU wasn't the only market India turned to. Shipments to Russia also climbed in the first 7 months of this financial year. Moscow added 29 more Indian units from which it began importing seafood this year. And it provided Indian exporters one more door at a time when one of the biggest doors, the US, was tightening. An official put it simply: India has moved away from a one country, one product, one species export mindset. The old model was too risky. Today, the sector is working on a diversified market, many products, multiple species approach. That shift is what cushioned the tariff blow. Back at home, the Indian seafood industry is feeling the impact of lower domestic input costs. Industry insiders say the duty cuts on fish feed, equipment, and improved working conditions help reduce production costs across the chain. At a time when exporters are facing high tariffs in the US, lower domestic costs are giving them breathing space.
The cost of the equipments have come down, and the cost of the duty on the job work has also come down. So there's a huge fall in the duty impact at every stage in the production process. So this should help to bring down the overall cost in the domestic market.
All of this together tells one story. When US tariffs hit, India recalibrated fast. It built confidence with Europe. It reopened links with Russia. It leaned on China, Vietnam, and the UK, and it strengthened standards at home to maintain credibility abroad. Moving on to a high-stakes diplomatic gamble that stretched 5 hours inside the Kremlin, but still failed to unlock a path to peace. The war in Ukraine, now the deadliest conflict Europe has seen in generations, remains stuck on the same hard question that has haunted every negotiation so far: territory. On Tuesday, President Trump's senior envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner sat down with Vladimir Putin in Moscow after the Russian president hinted at a possible expansion of the war into Europe. Their mission was clear: present a revised US peace plan for Ukraine, a plan reshaped after the first version sparked alarm in Kyiv and across Europe for offering what many saw as sweeping concessions to Moscow. Russian officials said the meeting had substance and structure.
The conversation was very useful, constructive, and very meaningful. It lasted not for 5 minutes, but for 5 hours.
President Putin's foreign policy advisor Yuri Ushakov revealed that the original American proposal had 4 major components, all of which were examined during the talks. Some points, he said, drew agreement. Others triggered what he described as a critical, even negative response from President Putin.
Naturally, we discussed with U.S. colleagues the content of those drafts, those documents which the Americans submitted to Moscow some time ago. We went through these documents. We did not discuss any specific formulas, any specific American proposals. We discussed the essence of what was there, in those American documents. We could agree with certain things, and the President Putin confirmed this to his interlocutors. We criticized some things, and the President did not hide our critical, even negative attitude to a number of proposals.
And on the centerpiece issue, that is territorial control, Ushakov said no compromise has been made yet. Russia continues to insist that the entire Donbass region must come under its control, either through negotiation or force. Ukraine firmly rejects this. The US delegation, Ushakov added, laid out new ideas, but the Kremlin held its ground. Ushakov stressed that all the details of the meeting will remain confidential.
We agreed with our U.S. colleagues that we would not disclose the substance of the negotiations that took place. This is quite logical, as the negotiations were absolutely confidential and closed to the public. As I know, our U.S. colleagues went to the U.S. Embassy, where they will report to Washington. Then they will go to Washington and report in person to President Trump on what they discussed with President Putin in the Kremlin.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio hit a more optimistic note, saying that the talks had made some progress. Meanwhile, President Trump himself, speaking at a cabinet meeting, called the war a quote-unquote mess that defies easy solutions.
Settled 8 wars. This would be the 9th, and our people are over in Russia right now to see if we can get it settled. Not an easy situation, let me tell you. What a mess. It's a war that never would have happened if I were president. Not even a chance. And it didn't happen for 4 years.
But just hours before the meeting, Putin delivered a stark warning to NATO capitals. He accused European nations of blocking peace efforts and said certain European demands were unacceptable to Russia. And then he added that Russia is ready for war with NATO countries if Europe wants to start it. The Russian president did not specify which demands he was referring to.
We are not planning to fight Europe. I have said this 100 times. But if Europe suddenly decides to wage war against us and starts it, we are ready right now. There can be no doubt about that. The question is, if Europe starts a war with us, I believe that very quickly. This is not Ukraine. With Ukraine, we act in a surgical, careful way. You understand, right? It is not war in the full modern sense of the word. If Europe chooses to start a war, the situation can very quickly reach a point where there will be no one left for us to negotiate with.
Now, over the past few weeks, several European governments have pushed back hard against the original US plan, arguing it gave too much away. And Ukraine has been lobbying them intensely. President Volodymyr Zelensky said in Paris this week that the updated American proposal looks better. Zelensky remains firm. Ukraine will not surrender territory it currently controls, nor accept limits on its military. He is also insisting on solid, enforceable security guarantees to prevent a repeat of Russia's invasion, and has said that the negotiations cannot take place without Europe.
The territorial issue is the most difficult. The issues of money and reconstruction, in my view, and I am speaking honestly and we have discussed this, are of course hard to finalize without the presence of our European partners, because the money is in Europe. To me, this does not seem entirely fair. And the issue of security guarantees is also crucial. We need concrete commitments from the United States and concrete commitments from Europe.
Several American media outlets reported that President Zelensky was expected to meet with Witkoff and Kushner in Europe after the meeting, as the Ukrainian president said he awaits the outcome of the meeting with President Putin.
With Steve yesterday and with him and with all his team, and we spoke. I think I already answered on your question that we are waiting for the results in America-Russia negotiations, today's results, and I will react according to the results.
That leaves negotiators trapped between two positions. So after 5 hours in the Kremlin and weeks of back and forth, one reality remains. Ending this war will require a breakthrough neither side is ready to make, at least not yet. And we end with a major controversy in the United States, after President Donald Trump launched a fiery attack against Somali immigrants, their elected representatives, and Minnesota's leadership. In a lengthy outburst, President Trump described Somalia as barely a country and claimed that refugees from there contribute nothing. He also accused Somali communities in Minnesota of ripping off the state for billions of dollars. Then, he also launched scathing remarks on Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Listen in.
I think that Walz is a grossly incompetent man. There's something wrong with him, okay? There's something wrong with him. And when you look at what he's done with Somalia, which is barely a country, you know, they have no anything. They just run around killing each other.
In his remarks, Trump also labeled Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and her associates garbage.
I see somebody like Ilhan Omar, who I don't know at all, but I always watch her for years. I've watched her complain about our Constitution, how she's being treated badly. Our Constitution, the United States of America, is a bad place. Hates everybody, hates Jewish people, hates everybody. And I think she's an incompetent person. She's a real terrible person.
And then the president went even further, declaring openly that he does not want Somali immigrants in the United States, insisting that in his view, Somalia is quote unquote no good for a reason, and that they should go back and fix where they came from.
You say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. Their country's no good for a reason. Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country. I could say that about other countries too. I can say it about other countries too. We don't want them to hell. We have to rebuild our country.
Trump's comments escalated into wider policy threats. He announced that his administration is preparing large-scale arrests. His administration also signaled new restrictions, a permanent pause on immigration from what he called third world countries. Minnesota is home to the largest Somali community in the US, with estimates around 80 to 84,000 people, many of whom are US citizens or long-term residents. City officials have made clear they will not cooperate with the enforcement operation, and the local police department will not participate. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey called the plan a frightening moment for the Somali community and reaffirmed that the Somali community is welcomed, valued, and protected.
We are here to respond to a number of credible reports from several media outlets relaying that there are as many as 100 federal agents that will be deployed to the Twin Cities with a specific focus on targeting our Somali community. To our Somali community, we love you and we stand with you. That commitment is rock solid. Minneapolis is proud to be home to the largest Somali community in the entire country. They've been here for decades.
Frey warned that this kind of targeting does more than create panic. It chips away at constitutional protections and reshapes who is treated as fully American.
Again, villainize an entire group is ridiculous under any circumstances. And the way that Donald Trump is consistently doing it, I think calls into question major constitutional violations, and it certainly violates the moral fabric of what we stand by in this country as Americans.
The Trump administration has also moved to roll back temporary protected status for Somalis. The US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, has been directed to locate and detain undocumented Somalis. Yesterday, the Trump administration announced a sweeping halt on immigration filings from 19 non-European countries. The order freezes green cards, naturalization requests and other filings, and expands partial travel bans. Introduced in June into a much broader bloc, the White House says the move is a direct response to the shooting of National Guard members in Washington on November the 26th, where an Afghan man was taken into custody. One soldier was killed and another was critically wounded. What happens next will depend on federal decisions in Washington. But in Minnesota, city officials say their position won't change. They will support Somali residents, reject discrimination, and work to keep their community safe. That's all we have on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Until then, thanks for watching.